Hi everyone. Welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. I'm tired. I don't understand how long this can go on and what am I waiting for. I really loved him. I loved him with all my heart. Yes, I was too young a girl then, when we got married, when we stood in front of the altar and his parents be damned. When I swore before God that I would love him forever and only heaven would part us. Why can't I take it back? Do I have to torture myself day in and day out just because I made those promises? I haven't loved him for a long time, just like he doesn't love me. He only loves himself, his parents, and our children. But who will love me? In these moments of despondency, I feel that even God has turned his back on me. How else could he have given me to this family for whom I am nothing, who only remember I exist when they need something? Summer, clean this up. Summer, take out the trash. Summer, damn it. Can you stop stomping your feet so loud? I'm sick of it. I have to tell Will everything. Take the kids and get out of this house. But who's gonna let me go, especially with the kids? Will's dad won't even let me leave the house. I hope I stay alive at least. This entry was made by Summer Inman in her personal diary, which she kept hidden from her husband and his parents. This diary, the one place where she could express her thoughts and not be afraid of being judged or even punished. 1983, Logan, Ohio. In a small American town of only 40,000 people, a new evangelical church called Tabernacle of Faith opens, which none of the residents had ever heard of before. The founder of the church, David Oyedepo, traveled to the town from Nigeria and told the congregation that he had an 18-hour meeting with God, during which the Almighty told him that it was time to free the world from the oppression of the devil through preaching and prayer. David Oyedepo was an extremely charismatic preacher, and that is why the Tabernacle of Faith Church became very popular in Logan. It was at this church that Bill and Sandra Inman met. Bill was already 18 years old at that time and played musical instruments at the church on Sundays. Sandra also attended church with her parents. Sandra recalls that the young musician parishioner very much liked her parents, and they did not hesitate to allow the young people to play a wedding. A year later, Bill and Sandra had a son, Will. According to family traditions, Will was born with his parents, went to church, and when he was 17 years old, then just like his father, met in the Tabernacle of Faith with a very young 15-year-old Summer Cook. Only with marriage young people were not in a hurry and waited until Summer was 18 years old. In 2004, after their wedding, Will's parents insisted that the young people lived with them. Summer did not like this idea, of course, but her husband was very dependent on his father and could not cross him, so she left her parents' house and moved into the house of the Inman family. That same year, another turning point in the Inman family's life occurs. Bill creates his own flock and remodels the family garage, formerly used as a workshop, into a self-proclaimed church. From Summer Inman's diary, Will's father has changed a lot. I literally don't recognize him. Tonight at family dinner, he told us that he hears the voice of God in his dreams, and that he wants to share this revelation with others for their own good. Will himself seems to realize that his father is becoming a religious fanatic. I've seen him roll his eyes, but what can he say against it? Yes, indeed, to some, like Summer, Bill Inman's idea may seem delusional, but locals came to his garage in droves, prayed, listened intently to their leaders' speeches, and even made donations. In 2005, Will and Summer had their firstborn son. They named him Alex, but right after the baby was born, everyone realized that their family was in huge financial trouble. The women were forbidden to work anywhere. They were obliged to do only household chores, and 4 adults and 1 infant cannot live only on donations from parishioners and on Will's rare part-time jobs. At a family council, Bill said they were moving to Florida. In Florida, Bill and Will did construction work while the women still stayed home and raised baby Alex. From Summer's diary, not much changed with the move to Florida. All day Will and his father disappear at work, and Sandra and I stay home with Alex all day and night. When is Will going to grow up and be on his own? I don't think I can wait for that. Having come to the conclusion that in Florida a lot of money cannot earn, Bill Inman decides to return to his native state. but because of non-payment of taxes, their house in Logan was taken away, and the court ruled a ban on its subsequent redemption. So they moved to a rented house in the countryside Vinton, which is not far from Logan. There, Summer also gives birth to 2 daughters, Kelly and Alana. From Summer's diary, we still don't have any money. Will wants me to have 12 children for him. I sometimes laugh in his face, which he takes offense to, and sometimes even stops talking to me. In 2010, Bill Inman, now officially the leader of Tabernacle of Faith Church, and together with his wife Sandra, they register a non-profit organization called Mercy Ranch. A bright idea is born in his head, to build on behalf of the church a home for orphans, widows, and the homeless. But naturally, there was no money for the idea. However, the new leader found a way out of this situation. He invented a lottery, according to which the winner will win $200,000, and the remaining 99 people will receive no less valuable prizes. The remaining funds would be used to build the house Bill dreamed of. Television and radio ads were run, and Bill himself even went door to door at first, asking residents to participate in the charity lottery. The result was stunning. Bill Inman managed to raise $1 million. The grand prize drawing was scheduled for September 2010, but as you may have guessed, no drawing took place in September. Just like it didn't take place in October or November, Bill Inman simply defrauded the people who trusted him, and he had no plans to return the money to anyone either. It is during this period that Will's father hires Adam Peters to take care of the landscaping on their property, as well as other household chores. Adam sees Summer all the time and begins to feel sympathy for her. What he doesn't realize is that Summer and Will are having a crisis in their relationship. Nevertheless, he does not give up and gives the young woman signs of attention. After a while, Summer filed for divorce. She took the children and went to her parents. There she got a job for the first time in her life, a cleaner at the bank. Unfortunately, because of her early marriage and constant confinement in the Inman home, she had no education and no work experience other than raising children, so Summer didn't expect to get a better paying job, but deep down she was glad even that, because for the first time in many years she felt independent and for the first time nobody told her anything. Despite her resentment toward Will, she didn't mind her father seeing the children as much as he saw fit. The children, in her opinion, needed their father as much as they needed their grandparents. Indeed, Bill Inman, despite his tyrannical character, treated the children very affectionately and caring. To deny this was foolish. One day in December 2010, a bailiff came to the Inman house and ordered the family to leave the house for non-payment of rent. Summer found out about it, and so she went over to the house to pick up all the things she hadn't had time to pack when she moved in with her parents. It was scary to show up at a house where she was now considered a traitor, so she called Adam to help her with the packing. When the Inman family saw that Summer had arrived with her new lover, they wouldn't let anyone in the house. They hurled all sorts of curses at them, and promised that all of Summer's belongings in the house would be burned in the backyard. Even the police couldn't help with the conflict, as Will attacked and even beat up a policeman who arrived, while Adam, who was shocked by what he had seen, shouted that he would find him and kill him. That same day, Summer decided to file a report against her husband. In it, she pointed out that Will had never been the same, that it wasn't until after the wedding that he became in complete control of her. Her calls, texts, emails, he even controlled her lunchtime and how much she needed to eat, how much time to spend in the shower, and how much time to be outdoors. Periodically, he even took her phone away from her, and Summer could be out of touch for a week, even with her own parents. He also admitted to her that he wanted to find a second wife, and without hiding from Summer, he registered on dating sites, where he posted intimate photos of himself and openly corresponded with other women. In her diary, Summer often wrote that she wanted to divorce Will, but was afraid. This fear was understandable. Will had warned her numerous times that if she divorced him, he would shoot her. The police took a statement from a frightened Summer, who had harbored the fear for so many years, and came to the Inman home again. When questioned, Will answered yes, he took his wife's phone away from her, but only so she wouldn't talk to her lover 24 hours a day. Yes, he watched her diet, but only because he cared about her health. His answers didn't seem credible to the police, and they forbade him to go near his ex-wife, and he also received a fine and probation for this behavior. The Inman family could not ignore such, as it seemed to them, abuse of their son, and they in turn wrote a response, but already on Adam Peters. In their statement, they pointed out that when he worked in their house, he showed an unhealthy interest in Summer's young children, and that the subsequent presence of children in his company could end badly. Their fictions, of course, were not confirmed. After that, the worst thing in Summer's life happened. Close to midnight, March 22, 2011, Summer was finishing her work at the bank, which is in the heart of Logan. The branch itself had closed by then, and all she had to do was clean up her workspace, dusting and taking out the trash. She'd texted Adam to tell him that she didn't have much time left, and that she'd be home soon. It was already 12 o'clock at night. Summer was late, although she had never been late before. Adam was beginning to get seriously worried. There was no telling what this might be up to. Peters decided to meet Summer. By then, the doors to the ward were locked. No lights were on in the windows, which meant Summer wasn't there. Adam walked around the building but didn't see anyone. So he went to the dumpsters where the young woman was hauling the trash bags that had accumulated all day. She wasn't there either, but near the bins he found Summer's things. Her purse, her cell phone, and her red jacket, which was lying in the grass, a little farther away from her things. There was no time to hesitate. He immediately dialed the phone number of the police. The police arrived and did a search of the belongings, then knocked on the bank and interviewed the security guards, to which they said that Summer had gone home over an hour ago, and they hadn't seen her again. At the glow of the police car's lights, 3 people approached. As it turned out, they were witnesses to the kidnapping. The 2 women were out for an evening jog, and although it was already dark, they saw a white Ford drive up to the bank cleaner's house. 2 men in black masks get out and push the screaming woman into the back seat. At the woman's screams, another eyewitness ran up to the car and tried to save her, but the blonde woman behind the wheel sprayed him in the face with a gas can, and the guy fell down and the car with the kidnappers drove away. The women were without phones, so they immediately ran to the nearest police station, where they interrupted each other very emotionally and tried to recount what they had seen. The police officers on duty only laughed at their story, naively believing that the night runners had made it all up. Who would think of kidnapping a bank cleaner with garbage bags in her hands? But as it turned out, the story was now pure truth, and because of the slowness of the cops, it was now impossible to find Summer on a hot lead. Like I said before, Logan is a small town. That's why the news of Summer's abduction by 3 unidentified men spread through the town overnight. By morning, proactive citizens had organized into groups to search for the missing woman. They scoured parks, vacant lots, abandoned warehouses, but Summer was nowhere to be found. A week before she disappeared, Will Inman tried to contest his child support payments. According to the court order, he was supposed to pay $150 for each child, but since his monthly salary was only $500, he asked that the payment be reduced to $150 for the 3 children in total. Will also asked for full custody of his children, but this was denied by the court. Since Summer was not in contact with anyone because of her long reclusive life, the police suspicions fell only on the Inman family. They were found in the house of Bill's mother in a neighboring town. All 3 said that they had not heard anything about the disappearance, and on the day of the kidnapping they were in Cleveland, where they wanted to find a new home, but unfortunately they never got there, because their car broke down on the way, and worried that they could get stuck at night on a deserted highway until morning, they had to return to Logan. Besides, their past grudge against Adam resurfaced, and they began to blame everything on him. The car breakdown could neither be proven nor disproven, but during the interrogation, the police saw a white Ford in the yard, just like the one described by the witnesses to the kidnapping. At that time, a GPS receiver was taken from the car. During the inspection, it was determined that it had been turned off during the period of Summer's abduction. The police also decided to check the Inman family's cell phones, which revealed that the family had not left Logan that night. Police soon received additional information that at 7:30 a.m. the morning of Summer's disappearance, the white Ford had stopped by a car wash where all 3 of them, Bill, Sandra, and Will, were dry cleaning the interior. The whole family was detained and taken in for questioning. Bill, who was already being led away under the arms of the police, shouted to his elderly mother that they were not guilty of anything, that it was the work of the devil against whom he and his parishioners were fighting. At the police station, the Inmans, as if bewitched, repeated the same thing, and only when it became clear that they had no alibi and they were facing execution, Sandra took the blame. From Sandra Inman's testimony, kidnapping Summer was my idea. It was my idea, and I was driving the white Ford that night. Of course, neither of us planned to kill Summer. I swear it was an accident. On the night of March 22nd, we drove up to the bank where Summer worked and waited a long time for her to finally finish her shift. At about 11 p.m., we saw her near the garbage cans near the bank. I drove up to her, and my husband Bill and son Will, who hid their faces under black masks, pushed Summer into the car. Again, we had no intention of killing her. The only thing we wanted was for her to let us see the kids since we are family. Will, in an act of intimidation, tied Summer's hands and feet with plastic ties to keep her from running away. Apparently, one of the ties he tightened around her neck. He overestimated his strength, and Summer began to choke and her face began to turn red. Will wanted to cut the tie, but he couldn't find a knife, and the knife we were taking with us had gotten under my seat, and when he did find it, it was too late. Summer was dead. Sandra Inman showed the place where they hid Summer's body. It was an old well near the Tabernacle of Faith Church. Yes, the same church where Bill and Sandra had first met, and then Will and Summer, the church where both had gotten married and where they'd gone to pray and confess for years. The autopsy confirmed Sandra's words. Summer had indeed died of asphyxiation. No other injuries were found on her body. In 2012, the court sentenced Bill Inman and Will Inman to life in prison, and Sandra Inman, despite taking all the blame, also received a life sentence, but the court allowed her to request parole after 15 years. Why is that? Apparently because, according to relatives, the women in the Inman family never decided anything. The whole family obediently obeyed only Bill, and if it was someone's cruel plan to regain custody of the children, it was his. And Sandra took the blame to save her husband and son, but she never succeeded. Story 2. In abusive relationships, one person often exhibits cruelty, aggression, and disrespect toward the other, whether a partner, spouse, relative, or colleague. Those who act overtly in such ways are often dismissed as just hot-headed or unable to control their emotions. However, the more dangerous form of abuse is the hidden kind, where others don't even suspect it, believing the family to be perfect until a tragedy occurs. The relationship between Alsu Sabashnikova and Timur Prokhorov was seen by everyone as a model of true love, understanding, and mutual support. They both grew up in the small rural community of Malexiskoj and met during their school years. After years of dating, they seemed destined for each other. The couple had a grand wedding with relatives coming from all over the region, but just 3 days after the celebration, the newlyweds were buried in the same grave at the local cemetery. What happened? Let's break down this complicated case. Alsu Sabashnikova, later Prokhorova, was born on January 4, 2001, in the village of Melex, located in the Tukovsky district of the Republic of Tatarstan. She was the youngest of 2 children. Alsu grew up alongside her older brother, Ruslin, who always looked out for her and protected her. When the children were still in school, their parents divorced, and the siblings stayed with their mother, Ilfira Shariva. Soon after, their mother remarried, and the family moved to the home of her new husband in the village of Malekskoj, about 12 miles from the larger city of Naberezhny Chelny. Alsu and Ruslin were accepting of their mother's choice and quickly formed a bond with their stepfather, who treated them as his own children. In turn, they also began calling him Dad. The village was small, quiet, and peaceful, with a population of just over 2,000 people. Most residents knew one another well. Alsu and Ruslin adapted quickly, enrolled in the local school, and made many new friends. Life here was calm, without the hustle and bustle found in larger cities. The community was mostly made up of Russians, Tatars, and Uzbeks. Once a week, the local community center held dances, and there were also classes for the performing arts, dance, and choral singing. On holidays, concerts showcasing local talent were common. Alsu excelled in school and was a straight-A student. Teachers described her as very smart, responsible, serious, and goal-orientated. A girl you could always rely on. She had a calm and balanced nature, was a born diplomat and could peacefully resolve any conflict. On top of that, Alsu was incredibly beautiful, attracting people with her kindness, and everyone wanted to be her friend. Alsu's closest friend, from childhood until her tragic end, was her paternal cousin, Sabrina Sobashnikova. Sabrina was 3 years younger than Alsu, but the girls never seemed to notice the age gap. They kept in touch constantly, shared their most intimate secrets, and looked so much alike that they could have been sisters. Unfortunately, they would both share a tragic fate in the end. From a young age, Alsu experienced serious health challenges. She contracted a severe viral infection that led to complications with her kidneys. As a result, she suffered from chronic kidney failure, a condition that only worsened over time. Alsu was forced to regularly travel to a specialized clinic in Naborozni Chelny for treatment and supportive care. She also underwent multiple blood cleansing procedures known as hemodialysis, as her kidneys were no longer able to perform their primary functions. The Sobashnikova family was not wealthy, and the ongoing medical treatments, medications, and procedures required significant financial resources. During flare-ups of her condition, Alsu had to switch to homeschooling, sometimes missing several months of school. As a result, she wasn't able to fully prepare for her graduation exams or entrance exams for higher education. Despite these challenges, Alsu dreamed of furthering her education and hoped to attend the prestigious Naborozni Chelny branch of the Kazan Innovative University. She aimed to pursue a degree in economics, but she knew that her health would make it difficult to keep up with the demands of university life. Moreover, the majority of the family's budget went toward her treatments and medications, making it impossible for her to afford tuition. Her mother reassured her, suggesting that she could initially attend a vocational college and acquire a skill that would provide stable income, postponing higher education for later. Alsu tried to stay positive, determined to find a career she enjoyed and to become independent, not wanting to be a burden on her family. She remained optimistic about the future and continued to search for her path. She completed courses in eyelash extension and nail care and began taking clients at home, which was an ideal arrangement for her given her health situation. While still in school, Alsu met Timur Prokhorov, an older high school student who was 4 years her senior. The two quickly developed a close bond, which later blossomed into a romantic relationship. This relationship eventually led to their marriage. What do we know about Timur Prokhorov? Timur was born in 1997 in Naborozni Chelny, the younger of 2 sons in a relatively well-off family. His parents ran a small but stable business that provided them with a comfortable income, allowing them to give their children the best, particularly in terms of education. Timur's older brother Artur, who was very close to him, earned a law degree and now works with the Ministry of Internal Affairs. In the late 2000s, the Prokhorov family purchased land in the village of Maleksko and began building their home. Several years later, they moved to the area with their children and settled in. The boys helped their parents with the construction and finishing work on the house, as well as managing the household. Timur, according to friends, teachers, and locals, was always a kind and level-headed guy. He avoided conflicts and even more so, fights. He preferred to negotiate and resolve things peacefully. He was the kind of person who could admit when he was wrong and would apologize if felt he had done something wrong. In school, he was a good student, though not an outstanding one. He was involved in local arts, danced in a group, performed at the community center, and continued to perform even as an adult. When Timur's older brother was in university, he got married and moved back to Naborozni Chelny. Shortly after, the couple had 2 children, and they would often visit their relatives in Maleksko. The nephews and loved their uncle dearly and cherished their time with him. Timur was equally fond of them, often spoiling them and happily spending time with them. After finishing school, Timur enlisted in the military and served in the Navy. By this time, he and Alsu had already been dating, and she was eagerly awaiting his return. Not long after, Timur's mother was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. She quickly deteriorated and passed away within a few months, despite all efforts to treat her. A year later, Timur's father remarried, and his new wife was soon welcomed into the family. His adult children quickly bonded with her and embraced her as part of their family. About 6 months later, The couple moved back to Chelny to focus on business, and the nearly finished house in the village was passed on to their younger son, who continued to work on it himself. As mentioned earlier, Alsu and Timur met in high school, and their mutual affection developed quickly. Alsu was upfront with him about her serious health issues, but this didn't scare him away. Instead, he reassured her that they would face it together, enduring the hardships and challenges that came their way. After returning from military service, Timur continued his studies and later started working at his family's company. He earned well enough to support not only himself but also Alsu. However, Alsu didn't want to be a burden on anyone, so she continued to work hard from home. Unfortunately, due to her condition, she had to stop doing nail extensions as she could no longer work with most of the materials. Timur was incredibly caring toward Alsu. He drove her to Chelny and Kazan for her medical checkups, treatments, and therapies. He took care of her, always looking out for her and cherishing her deeply. He also got along well with Alsu's mother, who accepted him as her own son. In 2018, Alsu's health began to deteriorate rapidly. Her kidneys were failing, and she was no longer able to live without regular dialysis. The only chance for her survival was a kidney transplant. The perfect match was her own mother, who could be her donor, but the surgery and subsequent treatment were incredibly expensive, and the family simply didn't have the funds. Elias was in a precarious position, teetering between life and death. Due to severe swelling, her face became nearly unrecognizable. She was deeply distressed by the situation, especially her appearance, and didn't want Timur to see her like that. She even tried to stop him from visiting her in the hospital. However, Timur refused to listen to her, insisting on staying by her side. The news of Alsu's grave condition and the urgent need for an expensive surgery quickly spread through the town. Concerned neighbors decided to help in whatever way they could. A charity concert was organized at the local community center, and all the funds raised were donated to Alsu's family. Interestingly, Timur also performed that night as part of a dance group. The necessary amount was raised in a short time, and the life-saving surgery was paid for. Alsu and her mother traveled to a well-known clinic in Moscow, where a renowned surgeon had agreed to take on this difficult case. The surgery itself was a success, and both women managed to endure it well. However, Alsu faced a long recovery ahead. She had to take constant medication, stick to a strict diet, and undergo regular checkups to ensure that the transplanted kidney was functioning properly. Alsu spent nearly 6 months in the hospital, and after that, she stayed home for another year to avoid any risk of infection. Even a common cold could have been fatal to her in that fragile state. She followed all the doctor's instructions, even though it was incredibly hard for her both physically and mentally. Her mother, stepfather, and brother supported her through every step, encouraging her to stay positive and believe everything would be okay. They were also deeply concerned about her relationship with Timur. Not every young man could accept and cope with his partner's health struggles. If Timur had decided to leave at any point, no one would have blamed him, but he was resolute in his decision to stay with Alsu. During Alsu's illness, Timur practically lived at the hospital, staying by her bedside, and then at her parents' house. He was always ready to help, whether it was taking her to medical appointments or even traveling to another city in search of the necessary medication. Shortly after Alsu was discharged from the clinic, Timur officially proposed to her, and she happily accepted. In August 2021, Alsu and Timur went through the nikah ceremony, an important religious act in Islam that marks the union of a couple, similar to a Christian wedding. Afterward, they moved into the groom's house, which was still being completed. Alsu continued to work from home, while Timur commuted daily to his job in Chelny. They were saving up for a lavish wedding, which they planned to hold in January. On January 4th, 2022, Alsu turned 21, and on January 20th, the couple held their wedding at her parents' house. Family and friends from all over the Republic gathered to celebrate. Everyone wished the newlyweds a long and happy life together, and the celebration stretched on for 3 days. Guests described the couple as glowing with joy and happiness. Timur had expressed his desire to call Alsu's mother, Ilfira Shirieva, Mom, and Ilfira moved to tears, thanked God and fate for bringing such a wonderful husband to her daughter and a son-in-law to her. Alsu's bridesmaid was 18-year-old Sabrina, who had come from another city for the wedding and was scheduled to return on January 23rd for school on the 24th. She stayed at the newlyweds' home, where she had a separate room. Other guests were accommodated in Alsu's parents' house and nearby relatives' homes, as there were no hotels in the village or surrounding areas. On the night of January 23rd, Ilfira had a terrible dream where she couldn't find her daughter and saw her son-in-law silently tossing small coins into her hands. She woke up around 5 a.m., feeling deeply anxious and could not fall back asleep. She wanted to call Alsu, but it was too early, so she decided to wait a little longer. By 7 a.m., Ilfira couldn't wait any longer and called her daughter. There was no answer. Neither Sabrina nor Timur answered their phones either. Ilfira and her husband decided to the newlyweds' house. When they arrived around 7:30 a.m., they noticed Timur's car wasn't in the yard. At first, this didn't seem too alarming, but when Ilfira tried the door and realized it was unlocked, panic set in. There was no way her daughter, son-in-law, and sister could have left the house without locking it. Ilfira entered the house and began calling for her daughter and son-in-law, but there was no response. When she entered the living room, she nearly collapsed at the sight before her. On the floor, in pools of blood, lay the lifeless bodies of Alsu and Sabrina. The women had been stabbed multiple times with something sharp. It was clear that they had died several hours earlier as their bodies were cold and stiff. The woman screamed and ran out into the street, telling her husband everything, and he immediately called the police and emergency services. Authorities arrived at the scene at 7:50 a.m. Ilfira began experiencing heart problems and required medical attention herself. She was unable to answer questions clearly, crying and screaming, unable to believe that her daughter was no longer alive. By that time, relatives of the young couple had arrived at the house and neighbors began gathering at the sound of the commotion. Forensic experts found over a dozen stab wounds on the bodies of Alsu and Sabrina, inflicted by a knife and scissors. However, the murder weapons were not found in the house. The main suspect immediately became Timur, as he was nowhere to be found, and his phone was unreachable. However, his relatives quickly defended him, insisting that he couldn't have committed such a crime. All witnesses, including family and locals, unanimously stated that Timur was a loving and devoted husband who practically carried his wife on his hands. According to loved ones, the couple never even argued, and if they did have disagreements, Timur would never have raised his hand against someone he cherished more than anything. Yet soon, a few neighbors came forward, claiming that Timur was actually a hidden abuser. They said that he was extremely jealous of his beautiful wife, often having private arguments, and that their fights were sometimes even heard by others. Alsu had felt guilty because of her illness, and Timur allegedly told her that no one else would care for her but him. The evening before the tragedy, Timur and his friends stayed up late at their house. It was a Saturday, and they had been drinking with no particular rush to leave. When Timur went to see off the guests, it was already past midnight, and he disappeared for almost an hour and a half. During that time, Alsu texted her friend Anna, saying she was very worried about her husband and couldn't reach him, as he had left his phone behind. At 2 a.m., Alsu sent her friend a final message, saying that Timur had returned, everything was fine, and they were going to bed. She thanked Anna for her concern and sent a smiley. There was nothing in those messages that seemed alarming. On the contrary, everything appeared to be perfectly fine. Investigators speculated that Timur may have become jealous of someone Alsu had been in contact with, and upon returning, he had a heated argument. Since he had been drinking that evening, it was possible that he lost control of his emotions and grabbed a knife. Realizing what he had done, he likely fled the scene in his car, and now the authorities had to track him down to determine all the circumstances surrounding the incident. On January 23rd, it was reported that along the road towards Elabuga, in the parking lot of a small roadside cafe, a Lada Priora vehicle was found. Inside, the body of a young man was discovered. He had died from a gunshot wound to the chin. The weapon, a rifle, was found in his hands, and it seemed clear that he had taken his own life. The identity of the deceased was quickly confirmed. He was 25-year-old Timur Prokhorov, who had been wanted for questioning in connection with a double homicide. It was later revealed that the rifle belonged to Timur's father and had been kept in a secure safe in the home where Timur lived with his wife. It appeared that Timur had taken the weapon with him when he left that night, likely already knowing that he intended to end his life. Authorities seized footage from a security camera located on a building across from the Prokhorov residence. The video showed Timur leaving the house with friends. About an hour and a half later, he returned alone. However, he did not appear in the camera's view after that. It is important to note that the camera was focused on the street, so it was possible that Timur left and drove in the opposite direction, out of sight of the lens. One of the witnesses recalled that on the night of January 23rd, a local club was hosting a dance event. The club was located near the Prokhorov house, but the newlyweds did not attend, as they had guests over. At one point, an unfamiliar car drove up to their house, but soon left. The following morning, after news of the tragedy spread, 2 young men came looking for Timur. Upon learning of what had happened, they quickly left. No one was able to describe them afterward. As the investigation continued, a 47-year-old massage therapist from Neighborezny Chelny surfaced in the case. It was later revealed that she also provided intimate services at her home. Her name was kept out of the media, but it was alleged that Timur had visited her on several occasions. On the night of the tragedy, he texted her, asking if she could come over for a session. The woman was not surprised by the late-hour message and responded that she would be waiting for him. According to some reports, Timur visited the massage therapist after he had already committed the crime against his wife and her friend. They had an intimate encounter, but when the woman asked him to pay for the service, Timur refused. She threatened to report the incident, but instead of backing down, he became angry, insulted her, and hit her several times before leaving. The woman later went to the police, filing a report about the physical assault and claiming that Timur had also sexually assaulted her. However, for reasons that remain unclear, she later withdrew her statement. There were rumors that Prokhorov's relatives, who were well-connected, including within law enforcement, had managed to settle the matter. They allegedly ensured that the massage therapist's identity remained a secret, and she never spoke again about her connection to Timur, nor about the abuse she had suffered at his hands. There were speculations that Timur had visited the massage therapist before the incident. This could potentially explain his long absence that night. After returning home, an argument about jealousy might have ensued between him and his wife. Sabrina, most likely siding with a relative, may have escalated the situation, causing the enraged man to grab a knife and commit the crime against both women. It is worth noting that at 7:03 a.m. on January 23rd, the young man logged into his social media account for the last time. After that, he stopped responding to calls and messages. This time was later considered the approximate time of his death. The theories involving infidelity, jealousy, and sudden rage seemed out of character for Timur, based on how those around him described him. Even Alsa's relatives refused to believe in any of these theories, instead asserting that the crime was committed by an outsider. Those who knew Timur described him as kind, calm, thoughtful, and balanced. His brutal actions did not fit this image. Timur might have occasionally had a drink on his days off or during holidays, but no one ever saw him intoxicated. However, during a search of the house, a significant quantity of prescription painkillers previously prescribed to Timur's cancer-stricken mother was found. After her death, many strong medications were still left in the house, which, it appeared, someone continued to take periodically. They had not been disposed of and were carefully stored in a separate drawer. This new information gave rise to another theory. Timur may have been using these medications in secret. On that fateful night, he might have taken a large dose, mixing it with strong alcohol, potentially leading to hallucinations or a sudden outburst of anger. If this were the case, the crimes might have been committed while he was in an altered state of mind. Once he came to his senses and realized what he had done, he may have seen no other option but to end his own life as well. No criminal case was filed due to the death of the individual believed to have committed the crime, but the relatives of the deceased couple could not accept that Timur was the one responsible for such a brutal act. On the insistence of Alsu's mother, the young couple was buried in the same grave at the local cemetery. The mother claimed that her son-in-law would never have harmed her daughter because he loved her deeply and that they should not be separated even in death. News of the double tragedy spread quickly throughout the quiet village, sending shockwaves across the entire Republic of Tatarstan. Journalists from all over the region flocked to the town, eager to cover the sensational story. However, the Prokhorov and Sabashnikov families avoided speaking to the press. On the other hand, villagers, many of whom didn't even know the deceased, were eager to give interviews, often recounting bizarre rumors and gossip. As a result, the case became clouded with fabricated details, many of which were far from the truth. On January 26th, Timur's father gave an interview where he revealed that the autopsy had found signs of physical abuse on his son's body and that there was very little blood in the car, suggesting that Timur may have been beaten and shot elsewhere before his body was placed in the car. However, the following day, investigators officially refuted the elder Prokhorov's statements, confirming that there were no injuries to his son's body except for the gunshot wound. The bullet was shot under the chin at a specific angle, which pointed to the likelihood that Timur had taken his own life. Story 3. In the spring of 2016, in the quiet town of Fort Worth, located in the state of Texas, there was a brutal and cynical murder that shocked even the most experienced investigators. The victim of the crime was a young mother of many children named Elizabeth Paula Ariano, who worked as a paramedic, and you will be shocked to learn who was her executioner. The circumstances of the tragedy were so strange that at first the police even put forward the theory that Elizabeth may have voluntarily passed away. However, such a theory did not fit with the testimony of people who became accidental witnesses of the terrible scene. The investigation had to do a lot of hard work to understand everything and send the criminal to the dock. However, given the brutality of the crime he committed, the sentence handed down seemed too lenient and unfair to many. Elizabeth Paula Ariano was born in 1987, August 16th, in the American city of Fort Worth, Texas, where she was destined to live all her short life. She grew up with her two sisters, Alessandra and Giovanna, with whom she was always practically inseparable. Elizabeth's birth father left the family when she was very young. He showed no interest in the fate of his daughter and did not contact her in any way. Soon her mother, Juanita, remarried to a man named Fidel, who adopted her children and treated them as his own. Elizabeth had a very warm relationship with her stepfather, who supported and helped her in everything. The girl studied diligently at school and dreamed of one day becoming a doctor. In high school, she met a guy named Rudolph Ariano, with whom she soon had a romantic relationship. The young man was almost 8 years older than her, which somewhat embarrassed Elizabeth's parents, but they did not interfere with their romance, because the chosen daughter seemed to them a man serious and quite reliable. At the age of 16 years, barely out of school, Elizabeth married her lover legally. The couple, one after another, had 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter. But despite the appearance of numerous heirs, Elizabeth did not intend to become a housewife. She remembered her childhood dream, so Elizabeth graduated from medical school and got a job as a paramedic, planning to get a higher education to become a doctor. The young woman was kind and pious, brought up in Christian traditions. She regularly took her children to church, instilling in them love and compassion for their neighbors. Family and friends characterized her as a very responsive person, always ready to help. From the outside, their marriage with Rudolph seemed strong and happy. But after 13 years of living together, this union began to literally crack at the seams. Rudolph had been jealous of his young wife before, trying to control her in everything, but over time his behavior became simply unbearable. In the spring of 2016, Elizabeth, after another jealousy scene organized by her husband, took the children and moved to the house of her parents. Rudolph made an attempt to reconcile with his wife, but the young woman was tired of tolerating his fits of anger. In addition, she did not want the children almost every day to listen to the parents' scandals. So she gathered her courage and officially filed for divorce. A few days after Elizabeth took the children and filed for divorce, she mysteriously disappeared. According to friends and family, She was in good spirits and, in order to distract herself from family problems and a little divorce, decided after work to go with colleagues to a local club. So, on Friday evening, April 15, 2016, the 28-year-old young mother in the company of her friends went to a fun place. There she danced and had a good time, but did not touch alcohol because she planned to get home in her own car, on which she arrived at the club. Elizabeth returned home well past midnight on April 16th. Having parked the car, she called her friend, with whom she had vacationed at the club that night, and told her that she had already reached home and that she was all right. Elizabeth then hung up the phone, but never entered the house. The next morning, her mother Juanita was very worried when she found her daughter was not home. She knew that Elizabeth was planning to spend the evening with friends, but her daughter should have returned long ago. She couldn't leave somewhere unannounced, and besides, her car was parked outside the house, which meant that Elizabeth had returned from the club. When Juanita approached the car, it turned out that it was not locked. The key was still sticking in the ignition, and inside on the seat were her daughter's purse and cell phone. Naturally, she couldn't leave her personal belongings in the open car like that, which meant that something terrible had happened. The woman immediately called the police, reporting a missing person. The police believed that they would be able to solve the case, as they call it, on hot tracks. In addition, there was still hope that Elizabeth was alive, because there was no blood or signs of struggle in the car. But it wasn't that simple. The first thing was to reconstruct in the smallest detail the chronology of the events of that evening and night, to trace Elizabeth's entire route, to find and question all possible witnesses. First, friends and colleagues of the young woman with whom she had spent the evening before her disappearance were interviewed. They gave the exact time when she went home, and later Elizabeth herself called back, saying that she had reached the place safely. In addition, several calls and messages from her ex-husband Rudolph Ariano, who had persistently tried to contact her that night, were found in the missing person's cell phone, but Elizabeth never answered him. Police officers went to Rudolph's house to find out where he was and what he was doing the previous evening and night. According to the man, he had been in contact with his ex-spouse just the night before, and she had promised that she would bring the children to him for the weekend. But afterward, she stopped answering the phone, and he thought she had changed her mind. As for an alibi, Ariano's alibi was questionable. According to him, he sat with a friend at a local bar that evening, and around midnight he returned to his home and went to bed. His friend and several other people, who had been relaxing at the same establishment on Friday, confirmed that Rudolph was indeed there, but where he went afterward, no one could say for sure. The man assured that he had gone home, but as he now lived alone, there was no one to confirm this. Thus, the police were not going to exclude Mr. Ariano from the list of suspects. Besides, he didn't seem upset or worried. It was clear that he and Elizabeth were in the process of divorce, but they had been married for many years. She was the mother of his children, and it was strange that her disappearance had not affected him in any way. On the night of the disappearance of a young mother, a fisherman called the emergency services to report a strange incident he had witnessed. The man said that he was sitting alone with a fishing rod on a bridge, which is part of an interstate highway, when about 4:30 in the morning, he noticed a car drive onto the bridge, stop, and then the driver pulled out something large that looked like a person and threw it into the water. It also appeared to him that something bulky and obviously heavy was tied to this person. Since the fisherman was at a great distance and it was still dark, he could not see details, nor could he see the make and number of the car. In addition, there was a strong wind on the bridge, so the man could not hear anything. Soon another witness was found walking at night with his dog down by the bridge. He did not see what was happening on the bridge itself, but a heartbreaking scream caught his attention. Then he saw something large flying down from the bridge, followed by a splash and then silence. Based on the testimony of witnesses, the police decided to examine the pond near the bridge. A few hours later, divers came across a body with a massive piece of concrete tied to its neck with a rope. The drowned woman turned out to be the missing Elizabeth Ariano. Had it not been for the testimony of a passerby and a fisherman, her body would probably have been discovered very soon or not found at all, because the tide weight did not allow the body to float. Then a version was put forward that the young woman decided to leave her life voluntarily against the background of problems in the family. But this assumption was untenable, because it did not fit with the testimony of a witness who saw how someone threw her into the water, nor with the words of relatives, who assured that Elizabeth made great plans for life and would never do this to her children and parents. Elizabeth was still alive when a piece of concrete was tied to her neck and thrown off the bridge. This was evidenced by the forensic medical results, which showed that the young woman had suffocated, and by the testimony of a man who heard her desperate scream as she flew down the bridge. But who and for what reason could have so brutally massacred a mother of many children? Robbery was not considered because none of Elizabeth's belongings were taken. There were suggestions that the killer could have spotted Elizabeth in the club and then followed her home, or someone guarded her at home, waiting for her to return. The ex-husband of the deceased continued to insist that he was sleeping at his home on the night of the murder and had nothing to do with the crime. However, the investigators were still in no hurry to exclude Rudolph from the number of suspects because he had no alibi and his behavior raised more and more questions. At the funeral, the man put on an act. He wept at the coffin of his ex-wife, saying that he would like to be in her place or die with her. According to his sister Elizabeth, she even believed in the sincerity of his words. In addition, Rudolph actively helped in the creation of a charitable foundation to raise funds for the ceremony of farewell to his wife. But after the funeral, when the man was once again called to testify, he already looked and behaved completely different, as if nothing bad had happened in his life. After a detailed examination of all the CCTV footage from the last route Elizabeth took, it was determined that a car of the same make and color as Rudolph's had driven away from her parents' house around 3 a.m. The neighbor also recalled seeing the car parked on the road near the deceased's house. Their neighbor also recalled seeing the car parked on the road not far from the deceased's house. Moreover, it was established that the car had subsequently driven towards the very bridge from which the woman had been thrown. This circumstance raised many questions, and when the investigation requested Rudolph's cell phone data on the night of the crime, the questions became even more. It turned out that the man made several calls that night, first near Elizabeth's place of work, and then near the home of his mother-in-law and father-in-law. He also sent his ex-wife several messages trying to find out when she would return, but his messages went unanswered. Apparently, he had been following her and eventually decided to wait for her return at Elizabeth's parents' house. The police finally had enough evidence to arrest Rudolph as the prime suspect and bring him to the station for further questioning. One of the key witnesses in the case was Elizabeth and Rudolph's eldest son. When the boy was shown the rope removed from his mother's neck, the son stated that he had seen it earlier in the backyard of his father's house and remembered it well because he had played with it. Moreover, the boy also recognized a piece of concrete that had been lying in their garden shortly before after the fence had been replaced. Also, small fragments of this concrete were found in the trunk of the car belonging to Rudolph. The investigation found that the man waited for his ex-wife at her parents' home and abducted her before she could enter the house. He forced her into his car, in the trunk of which he had already prepared rope and concrete. Afterward, he drove to the bridge for the massacre, expecting to go unnoticed. Rudolph Ariano was taken into custody 10 days after his ex-wife's body was recovered from the lake. Despite a large amount of evidence and witness testimony proving his guilt, Rudolph denied any involvement in the crime and continued to insist that he was at home that night. Given the brutality of his actions, Rudolph was facing the ultimate penalty of death, and then, on the advice of his lawyer, he decided to confess to everything and cooperate with the investigation to mitigate the sentence. It wasn't until January 2019 that Ariano pleaded guilty in court and detailed how he kidnapped and murdered his ex-wife and the mother of their 4 children. Juanita, who was in the courtroom listening to his story, fainted, and Alessandra and Giovanna called their sister's killer a monster. Rudolph himself, though he admitted his guilt, felt no remorse or pangs of conscience. He spoke indifferently and coldly about his murder, did not apologize, and did not explain the motive for his terrible act. The court sentenced the murderer to life in prison without parole. Elizabeth's family members, although they considered such a sentence rather mild, but noted that they forgive Rudolph because they do not want their hearts to boil with hatred. Her parents and sisters are now responsible for the upbringing of the deceased woman's children. Story 4. 27th of April, 2024. A 55-year-old man living near Myrtle Beach decided to spend his day fishing along the Lambert River within the state park of the same name. This location was a favorite of his, appreciated for its secluded and tranquil atmosphere. Unlike more frequented recreational areas, Lambert Park provided a quiet retreat to reconnect with nature and escape the hustle of urban life. On that day, the man set himself up along a densely vegetated stretch of the riverbank. He prepared his fishing gear and began to enjoy the solitude. However, his peaceful outing was soon interrupted by a sound that seemed out of place. It was the muffled crying of a woman. The sound was subdued, neither loud nor panicked, but rather restrained and intermittent. It came from across the river, but the thick vegetation made it impossible to identify the source. Though concerned, the man chose not to intervene immediately, assuming someone might simply be dealing with a private moment of grief. He respected their space and decided to continue with his fishing. A few minutes passed and the crying ceased. The man relaxed, dismissing it as a fleeting event, but his calm was short-lived when he heard a sharp and unmistakable sound, a gunshot. This sound jolted him into action, making it clear that something serious might have happened. Feeling compelled to investigate, he decided to move toward the area where the sounds had originated. He navigated approximately 200 yards through dense vegetation before arriving at a small, cleared section of the riverbank. There, he encountered an unusual sight, a backpack lying on the ground, accompanied by a pair of sunglasses and a cell phone. The immediate area appeared deserted, with no signs of anyone nearby. The man inspected the belongings but found no evidence of a struggle or anything else alarming, such as blood. This only heightened his sense of unease. Curiosity and concern drove him to open the backpack, hoping to find clues about its owner. Inside, he discovered a wallet containing identification, cash, credit cards, some personal items, and a small Bible. Despite the contents, there was nothing that explained the strange sequence of events. Realizing the situation could be far more serious than he initially thought, the man promptly contacted emergency services. Law enforcement officers arrived approximately an hour later. After conducting a preliminary survey of the scene, they began a broader search of the surrounding area. Later that same day, a second report came in from another park visitor, who stumbled upon something even more unsettling. Myrtle Beach, located along the Atlantic coast in South Carolina, is renowned as a popular tourist destination. While the city's population sits at approximately 35,000, it swells significantly during the summer months with the influx of visitors. Myrtle Beach is famous for its expansive sandy beaches, upscale resorts, and a variety of entertainment options, including fine dining, golf courses, and attractions such as one of the largest aquariums in the region and a towering Ferris wheel. The area draws both affluent travelers and families seeking affordable vacations. Beyond its appeal to tourists, Myrtle Beach is home to numerous churches that play a central role in the local community. One of the most notable is Solid Rock Church, located in the heart of the city. Established as a spiritual hub for those seeking guidance and support during challenging times, Solid Rock quickly gained popularity. The church offers not only traditional services, but also educational and recreational programs tailored to the community, including youth activities. At the core of Solid Rock's mission is Pastor John Paul Miller. Appointed in 2009 at the age of 35, he brought with him a wealth of experience in spiritual leadership. Known for his charismatic approach and deep involvement with his congregation, John Paul quickly became a beloved figure. He was married to Allison, and together they raised 3 children, along with 1 child from a previous marriage. The Miller family lived in a house near the church, allowing them to maintain close ties with the community. That same year, the Francis family joined Solid Rock Church. Angelita and Michael Francis, along with their daughters, Mika and Sierra, had recently relocated to Myrtle Beach and chose the church as their spiritual home. For 14-year-old Mika, the church became a significant part of her life. She quickly formed friendships and immersed herself in the youth programs, many of which were personally led by Pastor John Paul. This involvement helped Mika integrate into the local community. Mika's older sister, Sierra, also participated in church activities, though her role was less prominent. Mika, on the other hand, stood out for her enthusiasm and faith, which did not go unnoticed. Her active engagement in church life provided opportunities to connect with other young members of the congregation. One such individual was Jeremy, a participant in the same youth programs as Mika. Over time, their relationship grew closer, and after several years, the young couple decided to marry. Their union appeared to be a perfect match. Their shared dedication to church activities and the strong support of their families seemed to lay a solid foundation for a happy life together. The wedding was held at Solid Rock Church, officiated by Pastor John Paul himself, underscoring its importance to the community. The ceremony was a joyful event, drawing a large number of congregants. Both families expressed their pride in the couple, viewing their marriage as a reflection of family values and spiritual unity. At that time, Mika and Jeremy were filled with optimism about their future, one they envisioned as centered around shared faith and mutual goals. After their wedding, Mika and Jeremy became even more deeply involved with the operations of Solid Rock Church. Mika took on administrative responsibilities, handling paperwork and coordinating events, while Jeremy focused on youth sports programs. He managed the church's flag football team and contributed to the development of other activities for teenagers. These roles allowed them to spend significant time together, which seemed like a seamless extension of their marriage. However, a few months after the wedding, the first signs of strain began to emerge in their relationship. The demands of their shared responsibilities at the church started to take a toll on Mika. Unlike the period before their marriage, when they had more time to focus on each other, their lives had become centered around work. Jeremy, deeply committed to his role, began to dedicate less time to providing emotional support for Mika, leaving her feeling increasingly isolated. Adding to the tension was Mika's growing involvement with other members of the church community, including the pastor's wife, Allison. As Mika took on more responsibilities in the administrative office, she became an indispensable part of the team. This blending of her professional and personal life created additional stress in her marriage. While their relationship appeared outwardly harmonious, the underlying issues continued to build. The couple chose not to share their struggles with others, maintaining an image of a happy union. Yet, those close to them began to notice subtle cracks in their relationship. These early signs of discord would later lay the groundwork for more significant challenges that would alter the course of their lives. After several months of working in the administrative office, Mika was promoted to a new role as the personal secretary to Pastor John Paul Miller. This decision was attributed to her organizational skills and her eagerness to take on more responsibilities within the church. The position required her to work closely with John Paul, including frequent one-on-one meetings and consistent communication to fulfill her duties. As Mika transitioned into this role, she began spending a significant amount of time with the pastor. John Paul valued her dedication and enthusiasm for church activities. Over time, their professional relationship evolved into more personal interactions. What started as discussions about faith and life eventually turned into more intimate conversations, forming a close emotional connection between them. This shift began to create tension in Mika's marriage. In 2016, everything changed abruptly. John Paul's wife, Allison, unexpectedly returned home early one day and discovered him in a compromising situation with Mika. This incident sparked a major conflict within the Miller household. Allison demanded an explanation, leading to a heated argument between the couple. Upon learning what had happened, Allison also chose to inform Mika's husband, Jeremy. The fallout from this event had repercussions that extended beyond the two families, impacting the church community as well. While those involved agreed to keep the details private, rumors of the affair began circulating among the congregation. Church staff and others close to the families noticed changes in the behavior of both John Paul and Mika, as well as the increasing strain between them and their spouses. Despite attempts to maintain a facade of normalcy, the conflict became impossible to hide. Both Allison and Jeremy filed for divorce around the same time. The process was deeply challenging and emotional for everyone involved. Allison left the church and relocated from Myrtle Beach with her children, seeking to rebuild her life away from the events that had shattered her marriage. Jeremy, for his part, ceased his involvement with Solid Rock entirely, choosing to distance himself from the church. A few months after the divorces were finalized, John Paul and Mika publicly announced their relationship. They openly declared themselves a couple, igniting another wave of discussion within the congregation. For many church members, this was a devastating revelation. The pastor, who had previously preached about the importance of family loyalty, was now at the center of a scandal that undermined his reputation and eroded the trust of some parishioners. In 2017, a year after beginning their relationship, John Paul Miller and Mika officially became husband and wife. Their wedding took place at Solid Rock Church, where John Paul continued to serve as pastor despite the lingering controversies surrounding his prior actions. The ceremony was attended by close friends, family, and members of the congregation. For many, it was seen as an attempt to restore trust in the pastor and mend the community's fractured perception of him following the revelation of his affair with Mika. For Mika, who was 23 years old at the time, the marriage marked a new chapter in her life, along with increased responsibilities within the church. Becoming the pastor's wife placed her in a leadership role, where she was expected to mentor and organize within the congregation. Many church members viewed this union as an opportunity for both the church and its pastor to move forward, leaving the mistakes of the past behind. Immediately after the wedding, Mika embraced her new duties at Solid Rock. Beyond her administrative work, she became an active participant in church programs, focusing on organizing missionary trips and charitable events. One of her key projects involved missions to Kenya. Using funds raised through donations, Mika oversaw the construction of schools, providing essential educational opportunities such as English and math instruction. These trips to Africa became a significant part of her new life. Mika personally managed local educational programs and coordinated the delivery of humanitarian aid. Her initiatives garnered strong support from the congregation, many of whom enthusiastically participated in these efforts. Mika's dedication and energy made her a symbol of activism within the community, inspiring others to engage in charitable work. In addition to her mission work, Mika began leading classes and seminars at the church. Her presentations focused on topics like family values, personal faith, and overcoming challenges. One subject particularly close to her heart was addressing domestic struggles. She spoke publicly about this issue, drawing attention not only from church members, but also from a wider audience on social media. Mika frequently shared content on her platforms, emphasizing the importance of respectful relationships and the need for support systems for those experiencing hardship. Mika's efforts gradually began to rebuild John Paul's reputation. While many in the congregation still harbored criticism toward him for his past behavior, Mika's proactive involvement in church and community activities helped shape the image of a stronger, more forward-thinking ministry. Her work became a cornerstone for Solid Rock, fostering youth engagement and promoting both spiritual and social growth. Despite Mika's dedication to maintaining both her marriage and her work alongside John Paul, tension within their relationship began to escalate. Over time, it became evident that their union, initially rooted in mutual understanding, was facing significant challenges. The core issues included increasing control from John Paul and his interference in both Mika's personal and professional life. One of the first signs of trouble was frequent disagreements over finances. John Paul assumed complete control of the family's bank accounts, restricting Mika's access to funds. While he justified this as a means of safeguarding their finances, it became a source of stress for Mika. She felt stripped of independence, especially given her active role in church and mission projects. Additionally, Mika began to notice her connections with friends and family becoming increasingly limited. John Paul criticized her for spending too much time with her family and accused her of being overly involved in matters he believed detracted from their marriage. He also began monitoring her phone calls and messages, leaving Mika with a constant sense of being under surveillance. These controlling behaviors added to the strain in their relationship, creating an environment where Mika felt increasingly isolated and constrained. Psychological manipulation within Mika and John Paul's marriage escalated to include threats. Mika confided in her sister, Sierra, and close friends that John Paul used her past mistakes and vulnerabilities as leverage. One of the most distressing instances involved personal photographs that he allegedly threatened to expose if she attempted to leave the marriage. These tactics deepened her fear and uncertainty about ending their relationship. Amid these challenges, Mika began taking steps to break free from John Paul's control. She reached out to Sierra for support and shared her intention to file for divorce. Together, they visited an attorney who started preparing the necessary documents. However, when John Paul became aware of her plans, the situation worsened. He confronted her, refusing to discuss divorce terms and insisted that their marriage must remain intact to protect the church's reputation. Unable to find common ground, Mika temporarily moved in with her family to escape the pressure. This time away gave her a brief reprieve, allowing her to reflect on the severity of her situation. However, John Paul convinced her to return, promising to change his behavior. Despite his assurances, the problems persisted. One of the most alarming incidents occurred with Mika's car. She contacted the police after discovering that all 4 of her tires had been slashed and a GPS tracker had been placed underneath the vehicle. Mika strongly suspected John Paul's involvement. Although there was no concrete evidence linking him to the act, his sudden appearance at the repair shop heightened her suspicions. The pressure from John Paul intensified. He pushed for Mika to be hospitalized, claiming her behavior had become erratic. Based on his assertions, doctors diagnosed her with a psychological disorder and recommended treatment. Mika, however, maintained that her recent actions were driven by a desire to reclaim her independence, not by instability. After her discharge, she filed a police report, alleging that John Paul had used her hospitalization as a means to undermine her autonomy. Mika's efforts to end the marriage faced significant obstacles. Despite support from her family and legal counsel, the divorce process was drawn out. John Paul continued to exert control over her life, leaving her in an increasingly vulnerable position. April 27, 2024 marked a turning point in this story. On that day, Mika left her home without informing her family or friends of her plans. The events that followed, pieced together from surveillance footage, phone records, and discovered evidence, revealed a sequence of actions leading to her untimely death. Surveillance footage confirmed that Mika visited a gun store earlier that morning. Store employees later described her as calm and composed during the visit. While completing her purchase, she engaged in casual conversation with the clerk. She left the store carrying a small case containing a legally purchased handgun. The receipt and payment records confirmed that she had made the purchase herself. After leaving the gun store, Mika drove toward Lambert National Park. Surveillance cameras captured her car along the highway leading to the park. Data from her mobile phone revealed several search queries for secluded locations and park areas, indicating that she had carefully planned her destination. Upon arriving at the park, Mika parked her car and walked toward the river. After some time, she made a call to emergency services. During the call, she stated her intention to end her life and requested that her location be shared with her family. The recorded call, later released to law enforcement, captured the somber tone in her voice, though it lacked any signs of panic or distress. Less than an hour later, a passerby fishing nearby reported hearing the sound of a gunshot. Responding officers discovered Mika's body along the riverbank. Nearby, they found her belongings, including a backpack containing identification, a phone, a wallet, and a small Bible. The handgun used in the incident was recovered in the water close to the scene. The investigation concluded that the firearm showed no evidence of other fingerprints. Based on the collected evidence, authorities determined that the gunshot was self-inflicted. It was also confirmed that Mika had arrived at the location alone, and no other individuals were captured on surveillance footage trailing her. The official police report listed the cause of death as self-inflicted harm. However, this conclusion raised concerns among Mika's family, who argued that she had not exhibited any signs of depression and had maintained an active lifestyle. They pointed to her recent efforts to finalize her divorce as evidence of her determination to start anew. Despite the official findings, Mika's tragic death stirred widespread attention and gave rise to numerous theories about what might have led to the event. With so many unanswered questions, the story resonated deeply, leaving an emotional impact on both her loved ones and the public. The central argument raised by Mika's family was based on information she had shared with her sister, Sierra. Shortly before her tragic passing, Mika confided in Sierra about the pressure and manipulation she faced from her husband, John Paul. According to Sierra, Mika had even warned her that if anything happened to her, John Paul would be responsible. These claims were further supported by entries in Mika's journal, discovered in her apartment after her death. The journal contained detailed accounts of her troubled relationship with John Paul. She wrote about emotional and psychological mistreatment, constant control, and threats. Mika described how John Paul frequently used her past mistakes against her and threatened to expose personal information if she attempted to leave him. In addition, both her family and the community began to scrutinize revelations about John Paul's conduct, including potential inappropriate relationships with other women in the church and allegations of financial misconduct. Some members of the congregation claimed that the pastor may have misappropriated funds meant for missions, using them for personal purposes. These accusations fueled a wave of rumors and conspiracy theories. On social media and in the press, speculation about John Paul's potential motives became a topic of heated discussion. His history of questionable behavior, such as allegedly placing a GPS tracker on Mika's car and threatening to release private photos of her, intensified public criticism. Some online users accused him of indirectly contributing to the tragedy, while others put forth more extreme theories, suggesting a staged crime. Despite the lack of direct evidence, the accusations against John Paul drew the attention of both law enforcement and the public. He became a focal point of widespread condemnation, even as authorities found no grounds to open a formal case against him. Mika's family's persistence and the details that emerged from her life kept the story alive, creating an atmosphere of tension and mistrust. After Mika's tragic death, the police immediately launched an investigation to uncover the circumstances surrounding the incident. However, it quickly became clear that local law enforcement would struggle to handle the case alone. Due to the widespread public attention, pressure from Mika's family, and numerous allegations against John Paul, the FBI stepped in to assist. Their involvement was driven by the complexity of the case and the need for an impartial examination of all aspects. A key focus of the investigation was the firearm found near Mika's body. Investigators confirmed that the handgun was purchased by Mika herself on the day of her death, supported by surveillance footage and financial transaction records. No evidence suggested that anyone else was involved in the purchase. Similarly, footage from the Lambert Park parking lot showed no suspicious vehicles or individuals who might have been following or accompanying her. Despite confirming that Mika had acted alone, the investigation expanded due to public accusations against John Paul. The FBI began a thorough review of his past, including his financial activities and interactions with church members. Evidence surfaced suggesting possible financial improprieties. While no formal charges were filed, these findings heightened suspicions surrounding John Paul and prompted further inquiries. One of the most discussed aspects of the case was John Paul's potential role in contributing to Mika's deteriorating emotional state. Her family provided investigators with her journal, which detailed instances of manipulation, threats, and psychological pressure allegedly exerted by her husband. While these entries did not lead to criminal charges, they raised serious questions about whether John Paul's actions might have played a part in the tragic outcome. The investigation also explored allegations of John Paul's inappropriate relationships with other women in the church community and his overall reputation. Several witnesses came forward with claims of questionable behavior by the pastor that may have negatively impacted those around him. However, none of these accusations were substantiated with sufficient evidence to hold him accountable. As of now, John Paul remains formally uncharged, though his standing within the church community has been severely damaged. He has been removed from his pastoral role but reportedly continues to receive payments from the church's budget. This decision has sparked mixed reactions among the congregation. Some have called for a complete severance of ties with him, while others argue that the allegations remain unproven. This tragic story has also left a lasting mark on Solid Rock Church itself. The controversy surrounding Micah's case has eroded trust in the church's leadership, led to a significant decline in attendance, and cast doubt on the effectiveness of its internal structures. Many former active members have publicly expressed their disappointment and ceased participation in church activities. By the conclusion of the investigation, many questions remained unanswered. The primary focus centered on the extent of John Paul's influence on his wife's emotional state and his potential responsibility in the events leading to her death. While law enforcement has not found sufficient grounds to press charges, the public continues to follow the case closely, debating new theories and emerging details. This story remains a deeply painful chapter for everyone involved, serving as a poignant reminder of how devastating hidden conflicts and unresolved injustices can be. Story 5. This high-profile story took place in January 2023 in the state of Pennsylvania, Limerick Township. The township, named after the first settler William Evans, is one of thousands of small and cozy towns scattered across the country. Here a measured and quiet life flows, and it seems that nothing can disturb this harmony. In such places, the inhabitants know each other by sight, and their friendship makes many of them one family. Jennifer and Blair's friendship began while they were working together. They were once business partners, collaborating on common projects. However, even after Blair decided to become a simple chef, their bond did not lose its strength. Their friendship grew beyond business and became more than just a working relationship. Their friendship took on a special significance because of Jennifer's 8-year-old son Noah, who has autism. Blair had always given his friend genuine support and helped her in caring for Noah. Their children were also friends. They often spent time together, and when the children's games would run late, Noah would stay overnight at the Watts house. Jennifer Brown, born in 1979, was an active and full-of-life woman. She was always smiling and exuded an energy that infected everyone around her. Friends and relatives often wondered how she managed to combine so many things and be active, but her true calling was motherhood. About the father of her son Noah, nothing was known. But this situation did not overshadow their lives, but on the contrary, made Jennifer stronger, especially after Noah was diagnosed in early childhood with autism. Taking care of her young son, Jennifer became a reliable support and best friend for him. Mom and son were inseparable friends, spending a lot of time together, sharing moments of joy and supporting each other in times of need. This friendship between them evoked feelings of tenderness and admiration from all who knew their family. The people of the small town saw their closeness and adored this family for their cheerfulness and genuine kindness. Unfortunately, none of them could have anticipated what would happen to Jennifer one winter day. On January 3, 2023, she disappeared without a trace. On the morning of January 4, 2023, the local Limerick Township Police Department received a disturbing call from Antonio Blair Watts Richardson. He was deeply concerned about the disappearance of his close friend. Even though it had been less than 24 hours since he had last seen her or heard her voice, the anxiety inside him was growing by the minute. For hours now, Tony had tried unsuccessfully to contact Jennifer, but all his attempts had gone unanswered. This behavior was completely unlike her. She was active and responsible, always answering calls or messages, especially in matters concerning her son Noah. However, on this day, for some reason, the boy's mom did not meet him after school. The missing person's family and friends were well aware of what a devoted mother and caring woman she was. Therefore, the sudden disappearance caused serious alarm to all who knew her and left no one indifferent. Antonio's call to the police was the first step in a long and mysterious investigation that would soon engulf the entire city and shake it with its tragedy. Immediately after Blair reported his girlfriend missing, a massive search began. Police officers, family, and friends joined forces, hoping to find any trace that might shed light on Jennifer's disappearance. It left many questions in the air, and the main one was, what could have caused the caring mom to leave her son without any explanation? At 4 o'clock that afternoon, Officer Stephen Crawford of the Limerick Township Police Department went to the Brown family home to check on what was going on in the family home. He found that her vehicle was parked by the porch, and upon entering the home, he discovered that her keys, purse, tablet, and work cell phone were still in the house. However, the officer was unable to locate Jennifer's personal cell phone. Later, when police tried to track it down, it was discovered that the phone had been turned off at 7 a.m. on January 4th and could not be traced since then. The last location the signal came from was near Lewis Road and Ridge Pike in the town of Limerick. This was the first serious trace in the investigation and a sign that something terrible had happened to Jennifer. She was reported missing and police began investigating the case. Investigators began questioning her family, friends, and neighbors, hoping to find out if anyone had seen or heard anything at the time Jennifer disappeared. None of the young woman's loved ones or acquaintances, however, could provide any useful information. Her aunt, Diane Brem, and Jennifer's friends, Tiffany Barron and Blair Watts, claimed that there was no way the young mother would have left alone, as she could not leave her son alone. This was a woman full of devotion and love for her child. All efforts made by the authorities and volunteers were fruitless. They could not find any traces or clues as to where Jennifer might have been. Her loved ones appealed to the public through the media for any information on the possible whereabouts of the young woman. A reward was set up, but that too was inconclusive. The case of Jennifer Brown's mysterious disappearance was just beginning to develop, leaving investigators and family with questions and anxious expectations. The police investigation began with a close look at all the circumstances of that day, and her close friend Blair Watts, who was the last person to see Jennifer alive that day, came to the forefront. It was an ordinary January day. Jennifer and Blair sat in the cozy living room discussing life, future plans, and their children. Their children often played together, and Jennifer had asked her friend for help to pick up her son Noah from school so they could spend the evening together. This was a common practice for friends. Blair, being the loyal friend that he was, agreed, and after finishing their conversation, immediately headed to the school to pick up Noah. The next day, however, something strange happened. At school, Noah behaved unusually and caused his teachers concern. They noticed that the boy had missed 2 doses of his medication that helped him manage his condition due to his illness. This was highly unusual, as Jennifer had always been a devoted mother, never neglecting her son's caregiving responsibilities and always being in touch with teachers if anything happened at school. The school staff tried to find out where his mom was and was told by Noah that she had gone to the grocery store and had not returned. This caused even more concern, as this behavior of a sensitive woman was very uncharacteristic. She never left her son alone. At this time, Jennifer's friend, Blair Watts, also tried unsuccessfully to contact her. After not hearing back or contacting Jennifer, Blair decided to see if she would show up to pick up her son from the bus stop. However, when the woman never showed up and concern grew by the minute, Blair had no choice but to go to the police and report his friend missing. As time passed, no new information about the possible whereabouts of the missing woman had emerged since the investigation began. Hopes for her return were fading with each passing day. It seemed that Jennifer had disappeared without a trace and might never be found. But on January 18th, 2 weeks after her disappearance was reported, 2 employees working in a warehouse near Roseford, in the neighboring municipality of Limerick Township, discovered something strange. They came out of the building to get coffee and saw what appeared to be a freshly dug hole in front of them. When they went closer to inspect it, they were horrified to find the body of a woman buried in a shallow grave. The workers immediately notified the police, who immediately arrived at the burial site. Upon examining the body, police identified the young woman they had been searching for the past 2 weeks as Jennifer Brown. The sheriff called her family and informed them that the missing woman's body had been found partially buried near a warehouse in Roseford. An autopsy revealed that Jennifer's death was clearly violent. Death was due to asphyxiation, and she had 3 broken ribs. This indicated that Jennifer had probably struggled with her killer, who had beaten her to subdue her. Now, the nature of the investigation changed. The missing person case was reclassified as a murder case. Police once again began interviewing everyone who was close to the murdered woman, including her family and friends. However, these interviews yielded no new information about the case, and the police had no suspects. It seemed as if the investigation was about to wind down, and the police had no one to follow up on. But later, when detectives least expected it, they got a lead from an unexpected source. After the news of Jennifer's disappearance and murder was published, the police called for anyone who had any information that could help unravel this mysterious story to come forward to investigators. Noah's teacher came to that call. She recalled a case that at first glance seemed unimportant to her, but after Jennifer's death was recognized, raised serious suspicions. The teacher said that Noah shared with her an important detail about that terrible day, January 4th, when Jennifer disappeared. Little Noah told her that when Blair Watts picked him up from the bus stop on January 3rd, the boy noticed that among Blair's belongings was his mom's personal cell phone. Noah recognized it immediately, as the lock screen displayed his own childhood photo. That moment turned out to be key in the investigation into the young woman's murder. Previously, investigators had already assumed that Jennifer's killer carried away her cell phone. Now Blair Watts came into the spotlight, becoming the main suspect. The police began to scrutinize the relationship between Jennifer and Blair, and mysterious details began to come out, shocking even experienced investigators. Jennifer and Tony's friendship seemed solid and long-standing. They spent a lot of time together, knew each other well, and their families interacted with each other. But once the business side of their relationship came to light, it turned out there was a dark history lurking beneath the mask of friendship. Blair Watts was the owner of a restaurant called Birdie's Kitchen, which unfortunately fell into disrepair and closed in early 2022. After this, Blair turned to his friend, asking her for help. In August 2022, Jennifer decided to invest in her friend's business to help him revive Birdie's Kitchen in a new location. They entered into a contract that stipulated that Jennifer would provide regular financial contributions to keep the restaurant going every 6 weeks or so, in order to rebuild Birdie's Kitchen and get it back on the market. According to Blair, from August through January, Jennifer turned over approximately $36,000 to him to rebuild the business. They also agreed that she would hand him another $9,000, according to their agreement. Blair found a new location for the restaurant and was to deposit some of the money as rent, enter into a contract, and reopen Birdie's Kitchen in January 2023. However, it turned out that the money provided for the investment was spent on Blair's personal needs. The property owners with whom he had entered into the agreement drew attention to his failure to fulfill his financial obligations. Therefore, on December 26, 2022, they terminated the agreement with him. Blair found himself in a desperate situation. He lost not only his money, but also the opportunity to open his restaurant. The police began to suspect that in desperation he had decided to commit a terrible crime to save his business. Looking closely at the financial transaction history on Jennifer's iPad, investigators discovered 2 unauthorized transfers of $17,000 to Birdie's Kitchen on January 3rd. The funds were not included in the formal agreement between Brown and Blair. In addition, the transfers failed several times and were only successful after the 2-factor authentication system on the iPad was disabled, which increasingly pointed to Jennifer's friend's involvement in her murder. Police then interviewed the owners of the property, who had terminated their lease with Blair. It turned out that on January 4th, the very day Blair reported Jennifer missing, he appeared before them, saying he had the funds to enter into a lease agreement. Investigators were convinced that Blair was the killer. However, realizing that he would never admit his guilt, they needed to gather irrefutable evidence. Their first step was to interview Blair's wife, Tiara Taylor, and find out where Blair was the day Jennifer disappeared. Tiara told detectives that on January 3rd, Blair visited the Brown family around 1 p.m. and did not return home until 4:30 a.m., when he picked up Noah from the bus stop. Tiara also claimed that her husband came home only briefly and then left again around 5 p.m. and did not return until late that night. This time frame became a key point. Further investigation revealed that Blair had spent the night with Tatiana Garrett, his mistress, and did not meet up with her until around 8 p.m. This meant that between 5 and 8 p.m., Blair had no alibi. Based on the available evidence, detectives put together an alleged chronology of the murder. According to their version, on January 3rd, Blair went to Jennifer's house while Noah was at school at about 1 p.m. and allegedly killed her. He then made 2 transfers of funds from the murdered woman's iPad to his account and left to pick up Noah from the bus stop around 4 p.m. Later, he returned to Jennifer's house, dropped Noah off, and traveled back to the crime scene to dispose of the body. He took the body to a field near Roseford and buried it in a shallow grave. From there, the killer made his way to Tatiana's house, where he spent the rest of the night. Everything was carefully planned, and it would seem that the murderer might have gone unnoticed had it not been for one mistake he made, and it proved fatal. That mistake was letting Noah see his mother's cell phone. That was the key moment that led the police directly to Blair. Law enforcement now had enough evidence to convict Blair, but they decided to investigate further to see if he was guilty. It took the involvement of film experts and a specially trained dog capable of detecting cadaveric odors indoors. First, the dog was brought to Jennifer's home so that it could memorize the woman's scent. There, in her own kitchen, the terrible crime had taken place. The police then directed the dog to Blair's car, and it instantly detected the same depressing odor. It was the last piece of evidence needed to bolster detectives' confidence in Blair's involvement in the murder. On February 8th, after months of investigation, Blair was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, third-degree murder, and theft. He is currently incarcerated at the Montgomery County Correctional Facility with no bail application and awaiting a preliminary hearing where he will have to answer for his horrific acts before the law. Jennifer's friends and family were on the brink of despair when they discovered her dead, but their hearts are still pierced by the pain and shock that the killer was someone they knew and trusted, someone who should have been a close friend to Jennifer and her son. But now that the killer has been identified and brought to justice, they can finally feel that justice has been served. Tiffany Barron, a friend of Jennifer's who spoke on behalf of the family, expressed her feelings during the interview. "I still dream about Jennifer. Noah keeps asking about my mom, and I don't know what to say." At the conclusion of the investigation and trial, if Blair is found guilty, he will spend the rest of his life in custody. The case was solved thanks to the attentiveness of Jennifer's 8-year-old son. The boy noticed a mistake made by the killer. This helped to discover the truth and punish the criminal. The tragedy in Limerick Township serves as another reminder that even the most carefully planned crimes will sooner or later be solved. Meanness and inhumanity will not go unpunished, and the perpetrators will sooner or later be brought to justice before the law. Story 6. On the morning of August 22, 2016, residents of the small Spanish town of Pobra do Caramanal, rushing to work, found flyers posted everywhere. Volunteers had tirelessly pasted them on every building. The pictures on the flyers showed a young 18-year-old Diana Maria Kerr Lopez Pinal. The young girl was of a very frail build at about 6 feet tall. Her black hair, brown eyes, and delicate appearance made her irresistible. The evening before she disappeared, she was wearing pink shorts, a t-shirt, a white sweatshirt, and black sneakers. The description said the girl left home the night before and suddenly disappeared. Since last night, her family, along with volunteers and special services, have been desperately and tirelessly searching for the missing girl in every possible way. They have scoured every street and explored every corner, hoping to find some trace and bring Diana home. Juan Carlos, Diana's father, was in Madrid, but wasted no time in contacting the police to trace the calls from his daughter's phone and find out the last location of her phone. He also contacted the local newspaper and urged residents to help with the search. If you have any information, even the smallest, contact the police. "The police need your help," Diana's father reported. Diana's mother, on the verge of depression, pleaded with the public. "We are doing everything we can to find Diana, but we still haven't gotten any answers. If you have any information, please help us. We are in a situation where even the slightest rumor can become important and help us find our daughter." Diana Maria Kerr Lopez Pinal was born on August 12, 1998, in Madrid. She was the daughter of Diana Cristina Lopez Pinal Pinarejo and Juan Carlos Kerr, and had a sister named Valeria. The family was quite wealthy and closely related. However, in 2013, Diana's parents divorced, which greatly affected the sisters. They faced depression, often conflicted over the attention of their mother, who took most of the care of them. Despite this, the father saw his daughters regularly. During vacations, Diana and her mother and sister often visited the small town of Apoberdu-Caraminhal on the coast, with a population of about 10,000. In the summer of 2016, Diana's family spent their vacations as usual in the cozy town of Apoberdu-Caraminhal. Every summer, they returned here to enjoy the silence and beauty of the place. Sunday, August 21st, promised to be just like all the other days. In the evening, around 10 o'clock, Diana went up to her mother and told her that she was going to go to Valle England Park to meet her friends and have fun in honor of the feast of the Virgin Carmen. Valle England Park was not far from the cottage where the family was staying, and was a place where Diana often walked. Her mother, seeing nothing strange in it, allowed her to go there again. The girl spent that evening merrily among her friends. For hours later, Diana said goodbye to her friends and was about to return home, not realizing that this would be their last goodbye. On the way, she met her acquaintance, Paseo de Ariel, not far from the very pizzeria where Diana often spent time. It was about 2:30 in the morning when they said goodbye. Paseo de Ariel was the last person to see Diana on that dark night. The morning of August 22, 2016, turned into a nightmare for Diana's mother, Maria Care Lopez Pinal. At 8:30 in the morning, she realized that something was wrong with her daughter. The girl hadn't come home from a party. Her cell phone was off or out of range, and this caused alarm. The mother decided not to wait and immediately called the police, reporting her daughter missing. Based on the information from the mother, it could be concluded that Diana did not have any serious emotional or mental health issues, despite a troubled childhood due to her parents' divorce. Her prolonged absence was very strange and raised serious concerns. Police began to unravel the tangle of incomprehensible events surrounding the disappearance of Diana Maria Care Lopez Pinal, and investigators had to find out what happened when Diana disappeared without a trace. It turned out that Diana's last messages were sent to a friend of hers from Madrid via WhatsApp. In them, she wrote about a certain stranger who was stalking her and shouting strange phrases, scaring the girl. These messages were Diana's last contact with the outside world, as she no longer responded to the messages, although they were read. The next day, the police began to retrace the route Diana had to take to get home. It was there, along the road, that they found a black hairband that looked very much like the one Diana had been wearing that night. It was the only thing that was found at the scene of the disappearance. But other than that, investigators had no other evidence. Diana's friends were unable to provide any useful information, and there were no CCTV cameras on the last stretch of Diana's journey. The street was poorly lit and sparsely populated, with only a few garages and a dilapidated Boomerang nightclub along the road. Some witnesses claimed to have seen Diana get out of a car with 3 guys in it. Allegedly, she moved to another car, which took her away from the port. But these testimonies were not confirmed. Investigators considered 2 main versions of what happened. The first one suggested that Diana was kidnapped by someone she might have known. The second version linked the disappearance to a possible attack by a maniac. Diana's mother even suggested a third version, that her daughter could have been taken away on a boat. Diana's friend and ex-boyfriend reported that she met a guy from Morocco, and together, they bought hashish. But this information only complicated the picture of the disappearance. An important point was the information in the media about the discovery of the clothes that Diana wore that evening. However, Diana's mother denied this information, claiming that no clothes were found. In addition, her credit card and identification were left in the house. Diana could not just run away, leaving all her belongings and documents behind. This fact and other circumstances confirmed that the girl's disappearance was not of her own free will. Nevertheless, the case still remained mysterious and could not be solved. Shortly after Diana's disappearance, the press reported on the quarrel that broke out between Diana and her mother, just a few days before the tragic event. The media claimed that Diana had suffered a nervous breakdown that required medical attention, and that her younger sister, Valeria, had also been hospitalized with the same symptoms. To prevent further litigation and conflict, custody rights to the younger sister were transferred to the father on Thursday, September 1st. This was a preventative measure to avert further strife in the local community, which was already gripped by an unsettling atmosphere over Diana's disappearance. The father and his daughter left town, and rumors began to spread that the family was hiding something important. According to Diana's friends, running away from home was commonplace for the sisters, especially for her younger sister, Valeria, who was only 16 years old. Relationships in the family were complicated, and quarrels between mother and daughters were not uncommon. This information became available to the public, and the question immediately arose, why was the mother so anxious when Diana did not return home, if the girl had previously often left home? On Wednesday, August 31st, Diana's parents did not show up for a scheduled press interview where they were scheduled to give details of the investigation. The family lawyer explained that the parents were emotionally crushed at the thought that they might never see their daughter again. The newspaper El Mundo published an article on September 11th that shed light on other aspects of the family's life. It said that the mother's words that Diana did not have mental problems were contradicted by information about her April disappearance. At the time, Diana left home for 3 days and her mother did not contact police. The girl would turn off her phone to anger her mother and said she no longer wanted to live with her. Letters written by Diana and Valeria to each other also appeared in the press. From them, it became clear that both sisters were going through serious emotional problems. Valeria has even been hospitalized several times over the past year, once having to have her stomach pumped due to an overdose of prescription drugs. In the absence of progress in the investigation into Diana's disappearance, prosecutors have launched an investigation into the abuse of the Lopez Pinal family's youngest daughter, Valeria. The investigation into Diana Care's disappearance continued to be intense and progressed at full speed. Forensic experts seized a number of items belonging to the girl, including a toothbrush, a comb, a personal computer, her diary, and some prescription drugs. These items were subjected to a thorough analysis. Investigators then began questioning Diana's acquaintances, including a young Moroccan man with whom Diana had a brief affair. All of these measures failed to yield the desired results, and further police searches remained unsuccessful. The police conducted extensive searches in the mountains, forests, rivers, and lakes near the site of the disappearance. However, it appears that Diana disappeared around 3 a.m., and the last signal from her phone was found in the Tarragona area, 13 miles from where the family was staying. 72 days after her disappearance, Diana Care's case remained a mystery. None of the investigators' leads have yet been confirmed. In addition to a hairband, police found a cell phone that matched the description of Diana's phone. Her father confirmed that it was his daughter's cell phone. 2 months after her disappearance, Diana's Facebook profile was suddenly activated. Friends and relatives immediately notified the police and provided screenshots. It turned out that the Remind Password function had been used to avoid entering profile login details. This left 2 theories. Either Diana had forgotten her password, or the attacker was trying to gain access to her profile. Diana's phone was a key element in the case. However, it was never able to shed any light on the mysterious disappearance. On November 10, 2016, the driver of the very car in which Diana was allegedly last seen was finally identified. The man had previously been detained on charges of human trafficking. Information about his involvement in Diana's disappearance was kept secret for a long time so as not to disrupt the investigation. His wife claimed that he was with her that night, which excluded him from the list of suspects. However, on December 25, 2017, an incident occurred that became a key point in the investigation. One of the girls was attacked by a man, demanding her phone and threatening her with a weapon. The terrified victim screamed and a couple passing by came to her aid. They rescued the girl from the thug who tried to pull her into a car. The shaken victim immediately contacted police, providing a description of the perpetrator and his license plate number. The next morning, police arrested 41-year-old Jose Enrique Abing, who was also known as El Chico. The man already had a criminal past. The police immediately found out Jose Enrique turned out to be the same driver detained in 2016 on suspicion of kidnapping Diana Kerr. However, he was then released because they believed the alibi provided by his wife. The police again questioned the suspect and his wife. As a result of the interrogation, the wife admitted that she had previously lied and, in fact, on the night of Diana's disappearance, her husband was out of the house and did not return until 4 a.m. Jose Enrique was eventually forced to admit that he accidentally hit Diana on the road and then was afraid to go to the police. That is why he decided to dispose of the body. However, he later changed his version of events, confessing to kidnapping and killing Diana. According to him, he came to the seashore to pick up gasoline from abandoned cars, and it was there that he saw Diana. Jose kidnapped her, tried to force her to have sexual intercourse, and then strangled her. This shocking truth brought new details to the case and confirmed that Diana Kerr's disappearance was the result of a gruesome crime. The disappearance of Diana Kerr Lopez Pinal was a long and harrowing experience for her family and everyone who followed the case. Nearly 500 days of investigation and constant media speculation only added to the pain of her loved ones. The accusations directed at Diana's parents only served to confuse and hinder the investigation. Despite this, through persistent investigation and the testimony of a second victim, investigators were able to gather the necessary evidence and find the perpetrator. Diana will be remembered by her loved ones as a bright and vivacious young woman who was unlucky enough to find herself in the path of a violent criminal. Her story serves as a reminder of how important it is to unite in the difficult moments of fighting crime to end impunity and ensure the safety of all citizens. Unfortunately, the perpetrator did not admit for a long time where he hid Diana's body, but later, family and friends managed to say goodbye to Diana and give her a proper burial. The body was found in the well of an abandoned warehouse. In January 2018, Jose was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 35 years. And the night deepens. Thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep. And until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.